Hello everyone, welcome to this edition of the 6 p.m. primetime newscast on Equinox Television, live from my headquarters in Cameroon's economic capital, Douala. I am Babla Jonathan. In our top stories on this edition of the news, Honorable Awudu Mbaya, member of Cameroon's lower house of parliament from the Social Democratic Front SDF political party, says he will not walk on corpses and blood to maintain himself in parliament. In the upcoming municipal and legislative elections, he announced that he is stepping down as parliamentarian. Is not going to be standing for re-election in the February 2020 elections. Honorable Awudu Mbaya thinks that the socio-political and security climate in the northwest and southwest regions of the country do not permit elections to take place in those two regions. Also in this newscast, we'll talk about workers of the Cameroon Development Corporation, the CDC, in the southwest region of the country. It is one of the companies badly affected, or better still crumbled, by the Anglophone crisis. The workers went on a rampage demanding for months of unpaid salaries. Those were our top stories. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us on this edition of the news. We'll begin with news concerning the upcoming municipal and legislative elections in the Republic of Cameroon, scheduled for February 2020. And one of the members of the lower house of the country's parliament from the Social Democratic Front SDF political party said he's not going to stand for re-election. Honorable Awudu Mbaya made this announcement today in a press conference in the nation's political capital, Yaoundé, and he said that he will not walk on corpses and blood to maintain himself in parliament. Take a listen to Honorable Awudu Mbaya.
It's practically impossible to rally and move delegates from one or from all the corners of Dongalmanton division and the northwest region to Converge in the designated premises and vote in our primaries. Given also that many of my local SDF party officials have been either lost their lives, been framed and arrested, lost their family members, seen their homes and property burned down, or have been displaced by the war, whereas many other of my constituents, regardless of their political affiliation, are on the run for survival. After a deep and thoughtful reflection of the above with my God, my conscience, and my family, and given the current circumstances in the northwest region, I, Honorable Dr. Awudu Mbaya Sepin, Member of Parliament for Dongalmanton Central Constituency and Questor at the National Assembly of Cameroon, do hereby declare that I shall not seek re-election into Parliament in the legislative election slated for 9th of February 2020. Given that I have decided to put your safety, the safety of all my constituents first, before or above my personal political ambition of staying in Parliament, I must not go back to Parliament under the current circumstances, working on the blood and in disrespect of all my constituents who have lost their lives in this civil war. Be there the military, be there the civilian, be there the armed. All these people are the children of this nation.
Honorable Audumba, a member of the lower house of parliament of the Republic of Cameroon, speaking there, announcing that he's not going to stand for re-election in the upcoming municipal and legislative elections built for February 2020 in the Republic of Cameroon. And coming up, Derek Jato takes us to one of the localities brought down to its knees by the Anglophone crisis, one of the localities where there have been killings and destruction of properties within the context of the Anglophone crisis, and administrative authorities are now striving to revive that locality. I'm talking about Nguti in the southwest region. Derek Chato has more.
The senior divisional officer for Coupe Mwanengoba Division, EQUINOXE Jean-Marie, is on the field to see what has become of some prominent structure in Nguti subdivision. The commander-in-chief of Coupe Mwanengoba Division has seen for himself that a hospital at the center of this subdivision is left on its own as vegetation gradually takes up residence.
Les combats se sont déroulés sur deux théâtres. L'un ici.
A police station hit and set on fire since 2018 by the separatist fighters is yet to recover. From a distance, the police commissioner in charge explained to the senior divisional officer for Coupe Mwanengoba Division what happened that 20th of May 2018 in Nguti subdivision, the date that the police station was attacked.
L'un ici.
Here at the Nguti Council Hall, the solar system panel that were at the verge of going operational has seen no progress. The mayor of Nguti Council briefed the senior divisional officer that this is due to the persistent activities of the separatist fighters here that has punctured all developmental projects. Lastly, the senior divisional officer for Coupe Mwanengoba Division made a stop at the B camp, where the presence of these security forces has rejuvenated activities, the authorities say. The senior divisional officer for Coupe Mwanengoba Division, EQUINOXE Jean-Marie, left instructions to his collaborators to remain brave and made the people of Nguti subdivision see reason why they should not be afraid, but come back and take up their activities.
And now to the northwest region of the country, where they recently installed administrative officials, notably in the localities of Balikumbat and Ndop in the Ngokutunja division, have equally been urged to work hard to put an end to the crisis, to restore peace and normalcy in their areas of command, and of course to bring back life to those areas affected adversely by the Anglophone crisis, as Telambo reports.
This road was once motorable, but today it has become a footpath. It leads to the Balikumbat Integrated Health Center in Ngokutunja division of the Northwest region. Its current state is one of the consequences of the 3 years running Anglophone crisis. The population have left the area, abandoning their houses in ruins.
Mr. Bobby Eno, please take command.
The incoming divisional officer for Balikumbat takes over command at the Balikumbat Medicalized Health Center, away from the usual grandstand venue. Reports say the colors of the grandstand have been tampered with, and Mr. Fabi Enofrit, new divisional officer for the subdivision, is expected to bring the population back to their villages and work towards maintaining calm.
To ensure the socio-economic development by harnessing and uniting all the living positive forces of the subdivision towards this goal. To ensure the proper functioning, coordination, supervision, control, and continuity of all services. In this connection, public, para-public, and private services will have to go functional immediately. Mr. Dio, they have to go functional immediately.
In Ndop, The population came out en masse to welcome Mr. Nkenemo Michael as the new divisional officer. For fear of being victimized, inhabitants refused any interviews. Quaito Henderson, senior divisional officer from Kokutunja, installed Fobi and Ofrit in Balikumbat and Nkenemo Michael in Dob amidst heavy gun battles between the separatist fighters and members of the defense force.
And one of the major companies adversely affected by the Anglophone crisis is the Cameroon Development Corporation, CDC, that has been practically brought down to its knees, so to speak. And this is because of the constant attacks on that institution, on that company, and of course the workers who are often attacked in the plantations. And because of the Anglophone crisis, the Cameroon Development Corporation is no longer functioning in full capacity. Its workers went on strike today. They went on a rampage demanding for months of unpaid salaries, and the workers of the Cameroon Development Corporation of the technical department and the factory production unit were on a rampage. They were on rampage in Tico today. That is where they were demanding for months of unpaid salaries. And the peaceful protesters marched from the CDC through the streets of Tico, and of course they went to the divisional office calling for the intervention of the divisional officer. And of course the Yaoundé administration, the workers say the government has forgotten them and that they are tired waiting for the promises of the salaries. And of course they went on rampage in the streets of Tico today, demanding that the government should pay them. And in a similar story, some workers of the banana company in the Njombe locality, and notably La Plantation du Haut Penja, have expressed the anger via a strike action, and the workers think that they were unduly put on retirement. They were unduly sent on retirement, and so they took to the streets today protesting and disrupting activities in the company, as Hemini Luka reports.
It's out of anger, sorrow and total confusion that the tens of hundreds of workers of La Plantation au Penja have expressed their grief. On your various notice handles, the whole story is summarized. The workers have made their points clear, requesting the management body of La Plantation au Penja to either explain the motives of their impromptu imposed retirement or pay them off properly. The enterprise got us recruited, and out of a sudden we were sacked with no justification. Later on they started recounting issues like it's a decision which was taken by the state some years back, and here we are, asked to depart without even reasonable financial packages. The worker makes it clear the decision taken by the hierarchy to push them out of work is simply a strategy which will have a good number of them frustrated. Most are of age and others still wondering what next occupation could put food on their tables. A thorough situation of abuse which they beg for state intervention.
Experts in youth education have said corruption, repression and unemployment are some of the key contributing factors of violent extremism in Cameroon and the rest of the sub-Saharan part of Africa today. And they were speaking in a workshop on the fight against violent extremism in Douala. Details with Fomi Armstrong Sander.
Sub-region and the rest of sub-Saharan Africa, terrorist organizations sell the dream of a better economic and living conditions to gain sympathy and get people recruited into their ranks. Experts say terrorist groups like Boko Haram also benefit from the poor rates of education among youths to infiltrate and establish in several communities. Considering the porosity of borders among the countries within the CEMAC sub-region, stakeholders say there is need for member countries to jointly tackle the propagation of hate, violence and radical content, especially on social media. Against this backdrop, a workshop is currently ongoing in the city of Douala with an objective to sensitize youth from the sub-region on the necessity to shun violent extremism. Organized by the African Center for International Diplomatic, Economic and Strategic Studies, experts are coming from La Francophonie and youth ministries of member countries of the CEMAC sub-region. The experts maintain that other factors like corruption, repression and poor governance also contribute to radicalized youth and must be tackled by stakeholders. They insist that governments must tackle the question of unemployment, which according to them can help reduce youth radicalization. They also insist that governments must tackle the question of unemployment to avoid youth radicalization. Experts from youth ministries and centers in charge of youth affairs from Chad, Gabon, the Central African Republic and Cameroon hope to positively impact the sub-region on the fight against violence extremism after the workshop ongoing in the city of Douala.
The 2019 Synod meeting of the Presbyterian Church in Cameroon, the PCC, has ended with the re-election of Right Reverend Fonky Samuel Foba as the moderator of the Presbyterian Church in Cameroon, and Reverend Mike Hans, on his part, was elected as the new synod clerk of the church, taking over from Reverend Babila Forchang. And the synod meeting that was placed under the theme Peace and Unity came at a time when the PCC was facing the Anglophone crisis. The newly elected officials will have to do everything possible in order to mitigate the impact of the Anglophone crisis on the church, the different congregations, notably those in the northwest and southwest regions of the country, and also the institutions of the church, notably the schools in those two regions. Now take a listen to the new but old but new moderator of the PCC and the new synod clerk.
I've been crying all along because I've tested the burden of being a moderator for 5 years, and if the entire church, through the pastors and delegates to the synod, have given me that mandate again, I just pray that God will not abandon me on this journey of my second mandate, but that God himself will endow me with the strength I need. He will grant me the wisdom I need, and you are accompanying me on this journey so that we continue to grow and expand his church and make this church stand tall in Cameroon and beyond. Continuous transformation to move on with the activities that we did not complete in the past 5 years, and to see how we can continue to mobilize our resources to grow the church by transforming the entire PCC.
I feel really humbled that the synod, the Presbyterian Church, could give me this confidence, and I am really elated for the opportunity, and I'm sure by the grace of God we will serve the church. The synod itself is a synod of peace and unity. I think I am convinced that I am a man of peace. I like unity myself. As I said in the statement of faith, we must respect the hierarchy. The moderator is the vision bearer of the church, and I think that I am very ready to follow in that vision.
The moderator of the Presbyterian Church in Cameroon, Right Reverend Fonky Samuel Foba, and the new synod clerk, Reverend Mickey Hans, speaking there. And of course, we wrap up this first segment of the news in the Ngoro subdivision in the Mbamankim division, central region of the Republic of Cameroon, where Innocent Aze paints the ugly picture of chronic underdevelopment in that part of President Paul Biya's country.
Road networks in Ngoro subdivision, Bamankim division of the Central Region of Cameroon. Accessing the villages, Labo and Yanga folk requires a lot of gymnastic skills.
Que les routes soient aménagées comme il le faut parce que
this local and commercial motorbike rider expresses frustration and shame. Raising enough income for livelihoods and repair of his motorbike that suffers constant breakdown is not rosy.
Pour de vrai, vous-même vous avez constaté vous-même de vos propres yeux la route. Ça ne va pas.
That they stand for development.
Nous on veut du développement.
On n'évacue pas les vivres facilement.
This woman says foodstuff is cheap in Yangafok, but evacuating them to other towns like Ngoro is the problem due to high transportation costs.
C'est pas facile.
Apart from deplorable roads, hospitals and schools are also lacking.
On n'a pas d'hôpital.
With the absence of health units, women give birth in terrible conditions.
Et le marché, l'enclavement.
Nous n'avons pas la prime.
The school operating lacks teachers and good infrastructures to host the learners. When it rains, the classrooms are inundated and books drenched. No tap is available in the school. The mayor of Ngoro is now taking the bull by the horn to ensure the suffering population abandoned on their own are liberated from this social deprivation.
Si après plusieurs batailles menées par le maire, le préfet, le sous-préfet, nous bénéficions de la construction en cours d'un bac 9.
The mayor announces start of some developmental projects, especially construction of roads to facilitate transportation. The new divisional officer from Ngoro and the Ngoro Ellis in and out of Cameroon have been challenged by the senior divisional officer for the Bamankim division to work with traditional rulers who have put in place a development committee to get Ngoro out of enclavement.
Je nous rappelle de toutes les élites intérieures et extérieures. À ce sujet, vous devez soutenir l'action des chefs traditionnels qui ont mis sur pied un comité de développement.
That the Ellis should give all their intelligence, know-how, engagements, so that great projects be realized.
Porte la lumière aux frères et sœurs restés au village.
Apart from Ngoro, the central town resembles a place in ruins. 27 villages making up this administrative setting are in darkness. The over 20,000 people living here keep suffering enormously, expecting total development.
Talking Point is up next. Our guest is a historian and a writer, Tebo Tegui Walters. You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Babila.
You saw the pictures from the northwest and southwest regions of the country, from Nguti in the southwest, from Balikumbat, from Ndop in the Ngokutunja division in the northwest region of the country, projecting the impact of the Anglophone crisis. As a Cameroonian, what do you think about the situation on the ground in those two regions?
Yeah, what is surprising is that those pictures do not really match the government stance vis-a-vis what is going on the field, because the government gives the impression that everything is under normalcy, everything is under control, peace has returned. But when you look at those images, you agree with me that it's difficult to reconcile what we see with what the government says. So that is to attest to the fact that the situation is more than what the government tries to paint. It's more serious than the government wants the public to believe, or the international community to take as far as the Anglophone crisis or the Anglophone war. I don't know whether it's still a crisis, because it started as a crisis. I wonder if it's still at the level of the crisis, because it was a crisis at the level where lawyers were marching, teachers were protesting, but it has blown off into a full-fledged war. It's war. There's armed conflict. So I don't know this appellation of crisis. I don't know whether it still holds. nowadays, because we should be talking of the war. It's a war going on there.
Something that is a full-blown civil war.
Yeah, that is war. There's war going on there. I don't feel free to go to my village. I've come from Guzang. I don't feel safe there. There is war going on there. Why should we be calling it a crisis? It's not a crisis. It's beyond the level of a crisis. It's a war. War is going on there. You will see armored cars plying the streets, moving everywhere. There are areas where any human life seen around there, you're gone down. So how would you call that a crisis? You then need to just shut people down when there is a crisis? Now, a crisis means disagreement. But we are into war. People should call it war. It's a war. I don't see it as a crisis. It's no longer a crisis.
And the government has been undertaking some actions, measures, taking some measures also to bring down the situation, to water down the situation, to restore peace and normalcy in those two regions. The major national dialogue has come and gone, and now time has come for implementation of the recommendations, and the Prime Minister has put in place a kind of campaign to sensitize the people of those two regions, and the peace crusaders are already in the ground, moving across the two regions, sensitizing the people on the importance of returning to peace and normalcy, on the implementation, the special statutes and other recommendations, and many other things like this. What do you think about these actions undertaken by governments?
They are not sincere, Mr. Babila. I want to tell you, they are not sincere. It is just a kind of a stage, kind of a show. It's more of a show. What are you preaching to the people of Northwest?
A show over a serious matter like this?
It's more of a show. It's a serious matter, but what is coming as a solution is more of a show. I call it a show, and I have a reason. Because you will not tell me peace is the fruit of justice. You can't be talking of peace when there is no justice. Have these people been just? Have they given them justice? Have they looked into their issues? Or you just sit somewhere, cook some cosmetic solutions, and you send people to go out there and preach? Have you listened to them? You've not listened to them. You've picked up those who could sing praises to you, those who see eye to eye with you. You listen to their views, and you come up with something, and you're now sending people you had termed terrorists. Because I can recall, Cardinal Tumi is one of the crusaders, right? And I can tell you that he had difficulty trying to convene an Anglophone conference. He was not given the leeway to do it. And today he is preaching the resolutions. I will not even call them resolutions, Mr. Babila.
They are recommendations.
They are not even recommendations. What the dialogue, if it at all it was a dialogue, what it came up with was rather, they came up with prayer points. They are not recommendations, they are prayer points, which are still subject to the goodwill of somebody somewhere. The dialogue had there was no disposition taken as to see into the implementation of the resolutions of, if it at all was a dialogue. But all what was agreed upon has to be tabled before the head of state, who by his goodwill, by his grace, at his convenience, would decide what is good for the people. So what do you call that a dialogue? How then do you call that a dialogue? It falls short of a dialogue. Because when they talk of a dialogue, there's a commission that has to oversee the implementation of the resolutions of that commission or that committee or whatsoever you call it. But in the case of Cameroon, it was a kind of a masquerade, something done just to appease the public and the international community. Yeah.
Are you saying that the efforts of the government are going to be fruitless? Because
I will not say fruitless. The government itself, the government has, let me put it that way, is conscious of the problem. And the government knows the solution to the problem. And the government knows that what they are doing is not a solution to the problem. They are conscious of it. But now they want to project themselves before the international community as those advocating for peace and those advocating for normalcy, those advocating for all of this. So they are conscious. If you dig into them, you will see the honesty in it. Because you will not address a problem without getting into the roots of it. You will not. How will you be attributing medication to a patient without diagnosing the patient? They've not taken time proper to diagnose the issue, though they know it. Diagnosing it would just be wasting time. They wasted billions summoning people in Yaoundé for a dialogue to come up with prayer points. I call them prayer points. They're not recommendations. They are prayer points that people, Cameroonians, now have to sit, pray over them for God to answer.
All right. What do you think, in your humble opinion, should be done now?
Justice.
Instead of what is being done?
What has to be done is we have to be honest with ourselves. Anglophones today are victims of their love. They came into this union by their love. They love their brothers. They came into it with their hearts. But they've not been welcome. And they kept complaining that we are not welcome. And their fault today is that they have not been welcome. If you think they are welcome, welcome them. If you think they are not welcome, let them go. Stop playing around and using all kind of, I don't know how to term it. If the government wants to address this issue, the government knows the way out. The government knows the way out. But they are just playing around, believing that people will get tired, get discouraged, and then abandon the struggle. I don't think that it is going to work that way. The government needs to face this problem and address it.
The government has to face this problem and address it. You are also, I said it in the introduction, that you are a teacher and you're also a writer, and you have written a book called Remedy for English. What's your appraisal of the English language that is being spoken today by Cameroonians in their homes, in the streets, in the schools, in institutions, public and private, and so on?
Yeah, Babila, it's quite deplorable. It's quite deplorable. I've done all my studies here in Cameroon, though I happen to have done some studies online. But before I could get enrolled into this foreign institution that certified me as a language teacher, I had to go through a lot of bottlenecks, because to them, from the outside world, they know that English is not a language spoken in Cameroon. That is the impression from the outside world. So they had to delay me for 2 years before they could admit me into an international program. And they were prepared that I had to go through a language testing test, TOEFL or IELTS, before I could get into that international program. It means that from the outside world, our English is a problem. And I came to know this better when I took the course. I realized that there are a lot of things that we sit home here and we speak and people just understand, people just assume what we say. But if you go into the norms of the language, we are offside, as in the game of football. You're offside. It means if there were a referee to blow, he'll blow against you, that you're offside, please. You need to sit back. So the English we speak in Cameroon is a kind of breed of English which I don't know where it's coming from. I don't know where it has its roots, and I don't know where it's taking us to. And I want to think this kind of English is a reflection of the environment we live in, because the system we have in place is like they had a conspiracy to rubbish English and then dump it in the bin. So that accounts to the caliber of English that we speak in Cameroon. It's difficult for a Cameroonian to travel abroad. On arriving abroad, you speak, people understand you. And when they speak from abroad, Cameroonians, they have difficulty understanding. So there is a question mark on the quality of English that we speak here in Cameroon.
And in page 7 of the book, you say, appraise the English you speak.
Yep.
What's that all about? Appraise the English you speak.
Examine the English you speak. Do you really say what you intended to say? Do you really mean what you say? Because most often we speak what the other person listening to us gets as information. It's not what we intended saying. Because we probably might have used a wrong vocabulary. We probably might have missed the grammar. And we might have jumbled things up. And what the other person listening gets across the board is different from what we intended saying. So we need to examine, because you are judged by what you say. And I can only get better what you say from the sound that you produce when you speak. So I will not get into the writing. What you say is what I hear. And I analyze it my own way. And I will not get into your weaknesses to understand what you wanted to say. So we need to examine the English that we speak in Cameroon and see that it matches standard English, the international norms for the language.
All right, we will have other opportunities to get deeper into this, what I can call a masterpiece on the English language, and we'll have to discuss other issues that can improve the English we speak, the English we write in Cameroon, issues like what's to use instead of others, few versus little, say versus tell. We'll look at all of those things in during other news editions on Equinox Television. Thanks so much, Tebo Tegui Waters, for coming.
You're welcome, Bambla. I appreciate you.
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us.